family got its start probably with these two fellows right here. Charles Poe was born in 1888 in Joplin City, Missouri, and his son Hurley was born in Adair, Oklahoma, 18th of May, 1908. This picture is probably taken about 1911. Also sharing the responsibility for the Poe lineage is Zelda, shown here in the center, with her mother Myrtle and her grandmother Clementine, her brother Virgil in the background, and her sister Bertie. Interestingly enough, this photo was shot about the same time as the previous in the same photo studio. Charles and his second wife, Mamie, are shown here with Hurley and his stepbrother, Howard. This shows Hurley as a very young fellow, probably about the age of 2. Of course, his dress was a little bit different then. Hurley seemed to kind of develop an attitude of independence, and even by an early age shows maybe some of that independence here. Hurley, coming from Oklahoma, carried that cowboy spirit with him right into Redlands, California. Hurley is shown here with Zelda and their first child, Donald. No, this isn't Ozzie and Harriet Nelson. This is the Hurley and Zelda Poe family with Eugene, Donald, and Shirley. Here they are at one of the many Poe gatherings in Redlands, California, where the family settled. Hurley loved fishing, and it was one of his greatest pastimes. He enjoyed going to the beach and fishing, and he didn't mind telling you a few fish stories along the way. Hurley and Zelda spent a lot of time with their family. In particular, they were at almost all Christmas and holiday gatherings, and were always found having a great time with everybody. Here Eugene, Donald, and Shirley get together with Zelda. Zelda passed away in 1997, and Hurley passed away in 1981. Another good shot of Zelda and Eugene. Zelda was born on the 10th of November in 1908 in Somerset, Colorado. Grandpa, during his working period, did all kinds of jobs, and probably his favorite that most of us recall was working with the fire department. Here, a young Eugene Poe is shown with his first wife, Cleta Collins. And this picture is 1306 East Brockton, and that's Grandma standing out. Eugene met and married Jean Ann Yurdy, and in 1956 they threw quite a little wedding. This is the wedding party of 1956. Hurley, Zelda, Eugene, Jean Ann, Mary Arlene, and Harold Whitaker Yurdy. The Poes are known for throwing parties, and this wedding was no exception. Shirley is shown in the background with her bored look on. The party continues with Shirley and Willie, Eugene and Jean Ann, and Hurley in the foreground. Eugene and Jean Ann spent a lot of time at the beach, and this is probably back in about 1957. Eugene was quite a dashing dude back in those days, and here he's shown on the Hoover Dam. Of course, with those wedding bells came the most blessed event of their lives, in particular the birth of their first male child, Stephen Poe, March 19, 1957. Of equal importance, however, was their dog, and teaching him to beg. Of course, Stephen grew quickly, and although the dog knew more tricks, got plenty of attention. Here Eugene is shown holding both Stephen and Linda. Christmas at the Poe house is always a large event. Even back in the early days, you can see Harold, Eugene, and I think that's Donald in the background, working diligently into the evening on Christmas. Where he worked with an organ grinder collecting money. The Poe family, now 4, stands in the front yard for formal photographs. All the Poe boys have been known as flashy dressers. Larry, with his striped pants, and Steve, with his rubber boots, started the whole thing. These boys were some kind of flashy dressers. There wasn't a girl around that didn't scream, yell, and sometimes run away when they saw these boys coming. And then along came Dennis. Where there were 2, there were now 3. Oops! Make that 4. Brian came along, and you notice who's pulling the load. That would be Steve. So things are going along fine. We've got Steve, Larry, Dennis, and Brian. Then someone decided to go back to college. So Dad went back to College of the Desert and got an associate's degree in agriculture, which proved influential in the rest of his pursuits. The kids started imitating people right off. Here's Brian imitating his father with his tattoo. Then there were 5, with the addition of Doug. And just a few short years later, there were 6, with the addition of Greg. This is a pretty typical Poe family breakfast scene here. Figure somewhere around a package of cereal, maybe up to 2 gallons of milk. Multiply it out by the number of kids and the number of years. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 17,000 gallons of milk and almost 250,000 ounces of sugared cereal fed this family well. Snoopy the dog looks on underneath. The family moved to Indiana not long after that to run a Sambo's restaurant. And now we're flashing back to a couple of previous lifetimes. This was the Eel River bridge that went out to Rowan. The pig farm in Rowan, Indiana, where we had double-decker farrowing crates and a lot of pigs. This is Brian and Doug standing out in front of the farmhouse there in Rowan. And this is the same exact outfit that Brian had on when he talked his brother into taking him for a ride on his motorcycle. And Steve thought that he was wearing his helmet, but the police officer noticed he wasn't and gave Steve his first ticket. Thanks, Brian. Just a few years later, the Poe family is back to California, and all the kids have grown up, gotten married, had kids of their own. But Christmases are always a tradition where families get together. And what Christmas tradition would be complete without having Dad making waffles with Spam, and as of recent, without Spam for a few of the whiners in the family. Of course, the first grandchild came along, and that was Joshua, and Joshua turned out to be a pretty flashy dresser. Speaking of flashy dressers, a few of his boys turned out to be flashy dressers too. With 6 boys, not all of them are going to follow all the laws all the time. Brian, we still love you. But you have to say, this man is responsible for shaping a lot of lives. Here he was shown just a little while ago flying airplanes, and here he was shown just a little while ago still flying airplanes. And as of recent, shown with Greg Poe, stunt pilot, still with airplanes. Of course, Harold and Arlene were also a big part of the family as we were growing up, and here Harold and Arlene are shown with Caitlin and Stephanie. This is Eugene and Donald out in front of the horseshoe pit at one of the family get-togethers. Of course, each of the kids, in turn, got married, settled down, had children. This is Dennis and Cindy in their first trailer. But along the way, we had lots of good times. This is camping in Havasu. This is, of course, constructing an add-on garage to the Buena Circle house. And this is 704 South Grove Street back in Redlands. This photo is taken 1966. Among different projects that Grandpa worked on was a home-built camper. This is Harold Yurdy and Steve Poe giving Eugene a hand. Another major project of the Poe family was the boat barn constructed at Lake Havasu City. And this is Caitlin in the foreground, and you can see little roofers, Steve and Kit up on the roof there. Of course, anytime there was work to be done, everybody pitched in. Here we've got Doug, Larry, and Brian giving each other as much help as possible during construction of the boathouse at Havasu. Of course, we had a lot of great adventures with the Poe family. This is everybody up in Nebraska on the Niobrara River getting ready to partake of a canoe trip. Along with that, of course, Ellis Island was quite an experience, along with the Statue of Liberty. Here Eugene and Jeanne were at the Niagara Falls for the very first time. During that trip, we went up to Canada and enjoyed the big mosquitoes up in the woods at Smith Point. While we were in Michigan, we stayed with other cousins, Sheila and Pete McMillan, and had a great visit up there. Through it all, Eugene and Jeanne have raised 6 children and have 12 grandchildren, with more on the way, and the first great-grandchild. The boys and Dad at Dennis's house. The boys and Josh at Lake Havasu camping. The entire family in the back of the house in Palm Desert. The family out on a pier in Oceanside. Eugene and Jeanne at Dennis's wedding. Always messing around with boats at Lake Havasu. Always towing boats at Lake Havasu. And occasionally enjoying a ride in boats at Lake Havasu. This is one of my favorite photographs. One of the only times Steve ever was actually slalom skiing and doing a good job of it. Of course, every once in a while, you do see some unusual sights at Lake Havasu, including this blue moon. And this is probably the most economical boat that Eugene Poe has ever owned, and still functioning. The boys in front of Havasu again. This is kind of a unique picture. This is a picture of Joshua's grandparents together. Family at Christmas. The family in the backyard. The family on a wall. The family in the back. Family at Christmas. The family at a wedding. The boys in the backyard. The grandkids at Christmas. The boys at a wedding. The boys at Christmas. The boys at a wedding. And Mom in the rose garden. And finally, just to show that things hardly ever change, a good photograph showing the boys and the women in their lives.